my time and keep it to not more than 20 minutes. So let me just, okay, I've started that. Can everyone hear me okay? Good, good. Nobody's complaining anyway. All right. Well, thank you for inviting me. And I have given this or a similar presentation on the Sudan Study Group. But if you've heard it, don't worry, because I've made some changes. There'll be some new information. As you see, I'm in Thailand right now, and it's just past midnight here. Beautiful weather over here. The food is great. So anyway, thanks for this opportunity. This is a subject matter that's very close to my heart. I had the honor to live in Sudan for 5 years, from 1987 to 1992. I was working with the United Nations and USAID as a humanitarian relief official, responding to natural and man-made disasters. During that time, I was a stamp collector already, but during that time, I developed a strong interest in Sudan's postage stamps and postage history, particularly pre-independence, including the first provisional issues, which used Egyptian stamps. I realize I should have switched over to, okay. Now, can you see that map? And oh, no, you can't see it yet. Hang on a second. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay, now. Okay, can you see this map now?
Yes.
Okay, you all see the map. Okay, that's page one of my presentation. Now, the first provisional issue of Sudan used Egyptian stamps overprinted with the words Al Sudan in Arabic and Sudan in French. And I must confess that it was these stamps that also got me very interested in Egyptian stamps and postal history. At some point, it dawned on me that most of the provisional stamps in my collection bore fake overprints, and I was deeply disappointed and somewhat resentful given the amount of time and money I had invested. Nonetheless, I decided to face that problem head on, and with little in the way of precedent, I took on the challenge to devise a system for both detecting and classifying forged overprints. I did so with no small measure of trepidation, as I didn't wish to dignify or in any way encourage the practice of counterfeiting. Ultimately, I published the results of my study, roughly 200 pages, in hopes that it would help honest collectors and dealers to detect forgeries and in turn reduce the prevalence of forged material and, of course, encourage greater interest in Sudanese philately. And I take the opportunity here to clarify that the stamps themselves are not forgeries, but rather the overprints. Now, let me see. This is the first one. Okay, the first provisional stamps of Sudan were issued in March of 1897. Their primary use lasted just short of 12 months, yet they served an important and timely service. This stamp's historical relevance and relationship to both Egypt and Sudan proves to be an extremely, hang on. I'm just clicking the wrong buttons. It proves to be a compelling attraction for both Egypt and Sudan collectors. 1st of March of 1897, on the orders of Field Marshal Kitchener, contemporary Egyptian postage stamps overprinted Sudan in French and Arabic were made available to post offices throughout the areas under Anglo-Egyptian control. It was the Pyramid and Sphinx stamps of 1884 and 1893 that would be selected and used on a provisional basis as Sudan's first postage stamps. These included 8 values ranging from 1 million to 10 piastres. Similarly, 4 values of Egyptian postage due stamps were also used. All of these stamps were printed by Thomas de la Rue on ordinary paper and bearing the star and crescent watermark. The stamps were overprinted with the word Sudan to distinguish them for use in the newly conquered regions of Sudan. These stamps were employed for barely 12 months, and whilst short-lived, the historical significance and critical events of that period gives these stamps an alluring edge over their successors. The overprinting was done at the National Printing Office at Bulaq, Cairo, Egypt. Please forgive me if I mispronounce the Egyptian names. Printing was performed using a relatively new process called stereo printing. Stereotype printing involves the use of letters and symbols called sorts, which are inserted into brackets known as a chase to form a desired word, phrase, or design. In this case, the letters inserted to spell Sudan in both Arabic and Roman script. I'd like to point out that the font types used by the National Printing Office appear to be unique, and with one exception, I have never seen them used for making forgeries. A set of 6 virtually identical chases were then inserted into a single form, keeping in mind that each chase was less than 2 centimeters in length. The form would then be used to form 10 identical mirrored impressions on a papier-mâché or metal mold called a flong. A printing plate could then be produced, which would in turn be inserted into a printing press and used for actual printing. I give importance to the printing process because it illustrates that overprints were formed in perfect alignment within the sheet of 60 stamps. And this is one of the most important factors in identifying forged overprints. Despite using the latest printing technology and taking the utmost care, slight differences were realized in each of the 6 overprints. Those of us who are intimately familiar with the first provisional postage stamps of Sudan know that there are 6 primary overprint types. Becoming familiar with the variations is the first step in helping us to distinguish genuine overprints from forged overprints. As mentioned earlier, my interest in studying forged overprints began when I came to realize that most of the stamps in my collection bore fake overprints, for which I had spent a small fortune to acquire, like this 10 piastre value being listed for £39 on eBay. All of these stamps being listed on eBay during the same time frame, the main reason for this phenomenon dates back to the late 1800s. By 1890, stamp collecting was the rage in most of Europe and North America and remained one of the most popular hobbies until the late 1900s. At the same time, international tourism was becoming exponentially popular in Europe and the Mediterranean, with fully organized commercial tours to a variety of destinations, including Egypt. By 1897, the British public were entirely captivated with the progress of Kitchener's advance on Khartoum. Under the circumstances, collectors were desperately trying to acquire what few of the provisional issues made their way out of Sudan. With the demand high and the supply low, enterprising vendors took to forging overprints. Keep in mind that there was a virtually unlimited supply of Egyptian stamps that could be used for this purpose. This was particularly apparent in the tourist industry, with the proliferation of souvenir stamp sets. And these are genuine that I've acquired for my own collection. Here's another souvenir set sold to tourists who would most likely be unable to venture into the Sudan. And by the way, they're all forgeries. On the back of this one is inscribed, "To Master Douglas Jones, Essex, UK," making it an interesting item of postal history. And another, all bearing fake overprints. The best way to start the process of identifying forged provisional stamps of Sudan is to know the telltale signs commonly associated with them. I will briefly go through 7 of the most common clues, as that is all the time will permit. The first is postmarks bearing the names of non-Sudanese post offices. It makes sense that genuine used stamps of Sudan would most likely bear postmarks of Sudan. Those bearing postmarks of other countries, particularly Egypt, should be highly suspect. There are exceptions, as some receiving post offices may add a postmark to the front of the incoming letters, while most are applied to the back. Here's an example of a genuine overprinted provisional stamp with an Egyptian post office cancel. Again, forgive my pronunciation, Nachi Hamadi, the old name for Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt. The second clue is you'll recall that provisional stamps were only in circulation from March 1897 to April 1898. Therefore, it's improbable that you'll find genuine stamps with postmarks dated before that date, and somewhat unlikely after that period. These are 12 examples of fake overprints, all bearing postmarks with improbable dates. An exception is the Marawi Star and Crescent postmark, which bears a date line with the year 1896, presumably owing to a clerical mistake when the date was inserted. Most of my Marawi Star and Crescent postmarks have that date, and I have dozens of them. The third clue is overprints that are found on top of postmarks. A sure sign that an overprint is fake is when the overprint is on top of the postmark. That said, it's often very difficult to tell which is on top of what. Overprints that are overprints that are off-centered or tilting. One of the most common attributes of forged overprints is the haphazard manner in which they are applied. As you will recall, the official printing of the overprints virtually guaranteed that all would be perfectly centered and level. There are some rare exceptions, and these are usually attributed to printing mistakes that would normally be disposed of. Some, however, made their way onto the philatelic market. Fifth clue is overprints printed on stamps of chalk-surfaced paper. Sudan's provisional stamps used Egyptian stamps printed before 1897 and were therefore printed on ordinary paper. The same pyramid and sphinx stamps continued to be printed for Egypt until 1906, during which time chalk-surfaced paper was introduced. Therefore, if an overprint is found on stamps produced on chalk-surfaced paper, it must be a forgery. Determining the difference between chalk and ordinary paper is not always easy. The sixth clue, overprints that are any color other than black. Genuine overprints were always printed using black ink. Overprints of any other color are obvious forgeries. French language on a postmark. French language was commonly used for official purposes during that period. The only exceptions might be the date. What else? Here are several examples of forged overprints that are so unlike genuine overprints that even the most inexperienced collector would know the difference. Here are several examples of overprints that appear to have been made by hand. And here are 4 examples of overprints where the noon is dramatically different from a genuine overprint. And this state service stamp of Egypt was never officially used to produce provisional Sudanese stamps, and therefore an obvious fake. You'll recall that the first provisional stamps were also used for both telegraph and government services. Sadly, both were also victims of forgery, as we see here. And the purpose of this slide is to demonstrate the more obvious differences. The top one is the forgery, and it's perhaps a bit too perfect. And forged overprints on punctured SG stamps are quite rare, probably because the apparatus used for puncturing is not readily available to the public. And postal stationery, yet they do exist, as this certificate from the Royal Philatelic Society opines. Here's an interesting forgery. It's a very good forgery in that the letters, size, location are close to a genuine type 1 overprint. However, there are some physical irregularities that prove it to be a forgery. The more interesting thing is that whoever decided to add a forged overprint did so on a genuine Sudan stamp bearing a Sawakin postmark dated 23 February 1886, more than a year before provisionals were introduced. And as you will recall, Egypt was issuing stamps in Sawakin at that time. These are the two, by far, the two most common forgeries, and they probably comprise more than half of all forgeries. I mentioned earlier that there was one forged overprint that used the same lettering font as the genuine provisional stamps. These were made by a French national living and working in Egypt around the end of the 1800s by the name of Henri Cantel. Rumor has it that Cantel used his position and influence in government to obtain original printing plates, which he used to produce more stamps, ostensibly to promote the hobby of stamp collecting. Such stamps are generally referred to as bogus reprints, since they are technically genuine but not legal tender. Most of those known to have been produced by Cantel are unusual printings, including inverted overprints like this one. Off-centered overprints like this tend to be very rare and would normally be disposed of. Thus, suspicion that such stamps were the product of Cantel. For those bearing overprints that are leaning, one can only assume that these were produced for the philatelic market. To be fair, Cantel was credited with popularizing Egyptian philately by starting the first National Philatelic Society in Egypt, for which he held the position of president. My 200-page study on this subject is available in electronic form to members of the Sudan Study Group. Far more information is provided in this study for both detecting and classifying forgeries. Some differences are more obvious than others. These are genuine, and I use this to point out what characteristics are important to look for in genuine stamps so that you can compare them to forgeries. I have a classification system for forgeries, and each in the system entails looking for 22 key physical aspects which result in an alphanumeric label, such as this. Ultimately, I combine details of both classification and detection process into a single page for each forgery. All 110 of my forgeries are, have that same information. For those who simply wish to compare their suspected forgery with known forgeries, a simple photo of each is provided in my study. A short label has been provided with F standing for forgery and the number reflecting the numerical order of the classification label. And just to let you know that I really do have 100, actually I have more than 110 now. Just when I thought I had found all the existing forgeries, new ones keep popping up, such as these two, which I found in the last month. My intention is to have my study updated by early 2025, and hopefully this presentation will encourage collectors to share with me stamps that they believe may be new forgeries. And for those who do, please know that I give credit to the person who has offered the forgery. Information may be sent to my email address or as a message to me on the Egyptian Studies Circle Facebook group. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question.
Certainly.
The stereos that you showed at the beginning read the correct way, and I'm puzzled by this because they would print the wrong way. They would print in reverse. And so I'm
Yes,
a little bit
you
puzzled
are
by that.
you are correct. And if can you see this slide?
It's the slide, either the one above it, the slide above it,
Yeah, yeah. Let me.
showing the
If
actual physical
if
cliches.
yeah, if you see this one, if you can see it, you'll see that it's actually in reverse.
Oh,
And then yeah, it is. I do understand what you're saying. You're correct. You're correct.
and
I'm gonna
how do you know that these were reproduced using flong? I mean, I know that that's common. You know, it was used for newspapers and all sorts of things, but how did
yes.
you determine that? Was there any particular method that you used to do that?
I mean the forgeries or the genuine?
No, the genuines. You said the genuines were
Yeah.
produced from molds using flong.
Yes, that was from historical account.
Oh, I see. There's actually a historical record of how they did this.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And these were
And
from,
I was gonna say that in my book, it provides much more detail. And by the way, I'm once my book is updated, hopefully in the first half of 2025, I will share it with the Egyptian Studies Circle, and it will be available for free to Egyptian Studies Circle members on their website.
Bill, what could you, couple of things. Could you tell me the name of the book? I've got it down as Detection and
Oh, what's the name of it? I don't. I've cut.
Yes, we see it. Thank you.
When I decided to start collecting airmails, I really started from the very beginning, figuring out Pioneer flights would be where to start. We wouldn't start a discussion or a talk about Pioneer flights without mentioning the Wright brothers. This is an interesting unadopted essay that I found of an Egyptian stamp commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Wright brothers flight. The first UK aerial mail to Egypt, I found this postcard. I think it's one of 3 or 4 that was sent to Egypt. A flight, short flight to Windsor Palace, where mail was sent and then sent to London and distributed by surface mail thereafter. The Heliopolis Aerodrome is probably the first
Ahmed, sorry to interrupt. We're not seeing your screen move.
Thanks, Haney.
We're only seeing the very first slide.
Okay, just a second. Okay, sorry. Okay, can you see this?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, is it moving?
Yes, now it's moving. Thank you.
Okay. So I started, I mean,
click on slideshow and
okay.
then start from beginning. Yes. Start from the beginning.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Then we'll see the whole thing. We should anyway.
Do you see it now?
Click on from beginning again.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, there we go. We can see the very first Pioneer airmails of Egypt.
Okay. Is it moving forward?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Now it is. Now we see the first UK airmail.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you just click on each slide separately, Ahmed.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, there
Okay.
you go.
Okay. Of course, the common date found for the Heliopolis aerodrome, the 13th of February. I've managed to find two more dates, the 7th and the 8th. And this was an event that was the first in Africa, and sponsored by an Egyptian Philatelic Association was started in coordination with a French aeronautical society. I managed to find the 8th of February as well, and that's where I've gone with that. The aerodrome there was a plan for a second event, but the World War I happened, and the aerodrome was converted into a military camp, and a number of contingents were there, Australian, New Zealand, and the military stamp was used. This doesn't really mean that it was flown covers necessarily, but these were, this is to Wagga Wagga, and the next one, I'm sorry, it's a poor scan, without stamps on active service, and this was to England. And then the next one to Wellington, New Zealand. So in 1914, Mark Porp, who had spent some time in Egypt, conceived the idea of making a first flight to Khartoum, and discussed that with the Egyptian authorities and the French government. He was a pilot in the French Air Force, and the French gave permission to do that. And this was the first mail sent by air. And he flew for about 16 hours from Cairo, stopping at different cities until he reached Khartoum. And it took him about 16 hours to fly southward. Flew back to Cairo, and from Cairo to Suez, and eventually made his way to Port Said, where he left for France. As it was sponsored by the French Aeronautical Society, as well as the Egyptian Post Office, they came up with their cachet, which is in purple. I apologize, it's not really reflected here, but in this postcard. So these, I believe there was about 50 postcards altogether, 30 of which made the return journey, and he, I believe, picked up a couple of items from Khartoum going back. This probably takes us to the 1919 Egyptian Expeditionary Force and the Emergency Air Services. During that time, Saad Zaghloul and the 1919 revolution resulted in interrupting the communication services of the British forces. And so they started flying to Palestine and connecting by air. This service was in operation for about 48 days. and the different caches that came out. The type 1, which unframed, followed by type 2, which was circular. And the unframed was used in Alexandria from the 18th of March to the 3rd of April. And the circular, was used in Cairo during the same dates. Thereafter, type 3, which comes in black from Alexandria, and in violet or mauve, used in Cairo. And it's believed that these were the main cities, Cairo and Alexandria, where the mail originated, and not from any other towns, although there were mail that would be sent to these areas. Lucien Tutunji, in his work, subclassified the unframed cache into 4 subtypes, depending on the relationship between the words EEF, or the letters EEF, and the word Arial above it. And you'll notice that it shifts. The association was mail from Alexandria to Cairo, was subtype A. Subtype B was Alexandria to Suez. Subtype C, Alexandria to Gaza. And subtype D, to Deir el-Balah in Palestine. This is a wrapper on the first day of use, and it has both the unboxed cache, and you'll notice how it's shifted. So this was sent to Gaza on the 18th of March. And associated with it on the same cover is the circular cache. And this is, I believe, dated 20th of March. And I think the reasoning is fairly simple. They would reuse the envelopes. I'm not sure how they reused the wrapper, so I'm still trying to figure that out. And then again, another example. This was to Cairo. A third example to Port Said. This is very interesting, and I'm still trying to work on this on the hand stamp. The year is inverted. And I haven't really found a reference to explain that, or whether it's been noted before. So if anyone knows anything about this, I would appreciate.
Maybe they flew into the future and it's actually 1961.
Possibly, or it's a fake. So I don't know. Again, another from Cairo. You can see the violet and mauve. This was the 7th of April, 1919. And this to Baghdad on the I believe this was the 7th of April. The first stamp on the back is a second stamp used on the 28th. And that was previously thought to be the last day of usage. However, Lucien in his study noted a later date, I believe May 1st or 2nd. So this is another one on the 10th of April from Alexandria with the hand stamp of Mustafa Kemal, sent to Cairo. And with that began the RAF service and the beginnings of the Cairo to Baghdad mail. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, a civil commissioner in Mesopotamia, was to attend the Paris Peace Conference. and flew to Port Said from Baghdad on the 2nd of March, leaving Baghdad 24th of February. This is a cover with the violet cachet number 1 in relationship to the Cairo-Baghdad flight. The distance was about 860 miles, and navigating the flight was quite difficult. I mean, it was very interesting. New beacons and things along the way in order to be able to know their direction. I believe the flight broke down several times, 2 or 3 times on the way. A picture of the Hanedi Air Force Base, RAF Air Force Base in Baghdad. We talked about the first cache A. These are other caches that were used. Civil Post Cache B, airmail, general headquarters of the British forces, and different variants. And these you'll find different variants throughout your collections. The Post Office Service came out with a circular requiring either in manuscript or in caches that this was airmail Cairo to Baghdad. And I have a few examples here. This being one of them, Baghdad to California via Cairo. In manuscript from Abouesh to Baghdad on the 1923. Another one to Baghdad with the crown overprints. And in 1924, again, the British forces. So this would later be turned over to Imperial Airways in 1926. But it was of great importance because it really connected a lot of the other countries and was utilized. This was a cover from Damascus to Cairo. This is the airmail cache I discussed earlier. Another from Tehran to Germany with the Baghdad-Cairo connection, Poste Aérienne. German from Munich to Baghdad in 26. So the circular, which came out in on March 22nd, 1924, required either the airmail label to be on the left or handwritten, and the motor mail label to differentiate whether the mail was to go by air or overland. I will double back to 1919. The Captain Ross Smith, the England Australia Airways, and I've taken a more not worldly, but a more larger perspective, not just restricting myself to covers with Egyptian adhesives, but more international perspective is how I saw it, and trying to stick to really collecting all the important flights and how they related to Egypt, whether Egypt was a staging point or whether Egypt was a point along the road, along the way. The competition, there's a £10,000 first prize to whoever reached Australia within 30 days. There was a start date and an end date. Ross and his brother Keith flew a Vickers-Viney twin-engine biplane bomber and got there in 27 days and 20 hours. And this is the cover to the Prime Minister of Australia with a cachet per Vickers-Viney airplane. The next pioneer flight was really Alan Cobham flying from England to Cape Town and exploring the prelude to the Imperial Airways route. And really the impetus here was that the mail was taking too long to get to South Africa. He did make a stop in Egypt, and along the way, he would post postcards to his wife and others. And the notes are very interesting. This being from Luxor on the 17th of December, 1925. This from Wadi Halfa. I've sort of become obsessed a little bit with Alan Cobham. So this from Cape Town as he arrived with his signature on the back. These two were flown and mailed in Cape Town, from Cape Town, one back to London and the other locally. These were supposed to fly in, and so you would see the difference. So I apologize, it doesn't seem to be working. And this was a very unique and interesting find. This was a large size cover, eventually mailed from South Africa, carried along with the hand stamp and sometimes signatures of the different hotels they stayed at. Probably a unique piece. But the first up here was Hotel Angleterre in Athens, the Continental Savoy in Cairo, the Cataract Hotel in Aswan, the Grand Hotel in Khartoum on the 22nd of December. This, I believe, was in Malakal in Sudan, the governor's signature. Kisumu, Kenya, and this was in Bulawayo in Rhodesia. Very interesting, but I actually grew up in Kano, Nigeria. My father was an architect there, and so it was very interesting finding these pioneer flights. This was by Captain Cunningham, flying from Cairo through Sudan, and then cutting across westwards to Maiduguri in the eastern part of Nigeria, northeastern, and then to Kano, which was the capital of the north. And these two covers are actually return covers, even though they had King Fuad's stamp here, sent back. I think I found recently one that actually flew from Cairo to Kano. This was an interesting find. This was a memento from the mechanics that flew the plane, with a Chad adhesive and a Sudan adhesive here. Was carried with them going back. Al-Fashir here in Sudan, and then Chad right thereafter, right before they got to Nigeria. In 1926, another exploratory flight back and forth to Khartoum, originating in Abu Sweir by the Royal Air Force, and these are signed by Captain Stoner. There is the flight by the French forces cost us flying from France to downwards, and he broke down in Komombo, and these were posted from there, and they flew back, ending in Paris October 2nd. He would later try, and he was trying to emulate a record flight that had happened a couple of months ago, where two pilots had flown non-stop for 4,700 kilometers between Paris and Omsk in Russia. And he would eventually break the record of flying from Paris to Jask on the Gulf of Oman, flying 5,396 kilometers. Next is the France to Madagascar flight, originating in Marseille, two seaplanes flying down to Tunisia and then across West Africa, breaking down in Lokoja in Nigeria after flying 7,780 kilometers, making multiple stops along the way. There were two planes. One continued, Bernard continued to Madagascar, and the first pilot flying back eventually after the plane was fixed, Gulabad, flying back to Paris at a fairly leisurely rate. These are the most, I think, most colorful covers. The Sudan, this was posted in Sudan with the Winter Palace Luxor hand stamp. I believe Lucien Tutunji had the only cover with Egyptian adhesives, French post office adhesives, flying back to Paris. I was able to locate another one with Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania frankings and the hand stamps there. And this is believed to be unique. The next is the Captain Walter Mittelholzer flying from Zurich to Cape Town with these covers posted at two different areas, cities along the way. There was 3 stops where covers were mailed from Naples, Athens, and Alexandria. And it's not known that he took covers from where he stopped. This to Alexandria. In 1926, which was a fairly busy year, the RAF, the Royal Air Force, flew from Cairo down to Cape Town in another survey flight, Captain Pulford. And this is sent from Muizenberg, South Africa. This was flown from London to Cape Town. From Heliopolis, with the Heliopolis stamp here, but it was flown southward. I was able to locate a northward flight, and I believe this is one of a kind cover. There wasn't anything that was flown back, to my knowledge. I might be wrong there. Thereafter, the flights by Imperial Airways, who took over the route. Kisumu to Khartoum, and there's by Captain Gladstone. There's a number of flights And this was sort of plagued with multiple plane issues. The first flight, the plane needed to be repaired, and the flight was delayed. It was sent back to Athens to be fixed, and then it happened. But the first flight in the cache, Kenya, Sudan, on the 1st of February, or 15th of February, 1927, with the first here noting the first flight. These were eventually flown back to Cairo, and the back has the machine stamp here. This is a cover flown from Zanzibar, one of 12 known covers from Zanzibar on the flight. The cache was later to be changed and reused. This is from the first flight, cache number 2, with North Sea Aerial and General Transport Limited, and these are relatively rare. This was supposed to be a fly-in, I apologize. But this is a crash cover from the flight number 2. Again, you'll notice the cache here, Kenya, Sudan, but the first flight annotation is removed. And owing to temporary failure, Air Service Mail forwarded the normal route. And this is a cover flown southward from England to Uganda, flying eventually on the third flight. And eventually, in September of that year, this project was completely abandoned. I'm not sure a lot of people would consider the 1926 Cairo to Baghdad Imperial Airways first flight to be a pioneer flight, but homage to our first airmail stamp, I thought I put it in there, so sneak it in. Next was Carberry's, Lord Carberry's flight from Amsterdam to Kenya, notable for the airmail label, the special vignette labels that were made for the flight. The plane was called Miss Africa and was flown all the way down to Kenya. Captain Mittelholzer would make another flight in 1929. This to Catania. This was to Palmero, but Catania was one of the stops, with his signature and the violet hand stamp of Thomas Cook on the reverse. Another example. Coming towards the end, the Glen Kidston London Cape Town flight with these 5 stops, 20 covers were flown. This I believe to be envelope number 4 in 1931. With both, both KUT adhesives as well as South Africa. The Zeppelin flight, I think, was an important flight as well. Just briefly, a couple of covers from Hungary and from Germany. Cover with the Suez hand stamp. The Mac Robertson International Air Race was another one of those air races, and this was 1934, sponsored by Sir Macpherson Robertson, an Australian confectionery magnate. This was covered in about 11,000 miles from England to Melbourne in about 92 hours, almost 93 hours. Roscoe Turner was a American pilot. They did not make it all the way, and one of their stops was Cairo. The Schlesinger air race covers. This was a number of pilots that actually, this was a crash in Cairo on the 29th, didn't make it to South Africa. Captain Victor Smith retired from the race in Khartoum on the 3rd, so 4 days later, and he carried 35 covers. Captain Closton carried 45 covers, and he retired from the race in Rhodesia. This was kind of interesting. I found these covers. The first solo flight by a woman in 1937 from Brisbane to Cape Town via Cairo. Lord Bonnie, Mrs. Bonnie, and another male from India. And that's it. This was supposed to be an animation, so I apologize.
Wow.